Hello, my name is Laura Carrick. I'm a consultant anaesthetist and intensivist at UHDB. So I'm a consultant anaesthetist mainly in Derby, and I work on the ICU in Burton. And I've been asked today to talk about my experience in research. And I think this is because I've done quite a bit of research. I've done a formal degree. I've done a PhD with the University of Nottingham in medicine and health. But I've also done a lot of work with the Trainee Research Network. So I set up MERCAT, which is the TRN providing this educational event. And I've worked on the RAFT committee. So RAFT is the Research Audit Federation of Trainees, which is the umbrella network over the various TRNs, of which obviously MERCAT is one. And I've realised that, particularly through the work with RAFT and MERCAT, that a lot of people might want to get involved in research to the extent of doing a PhD, but for a lot of people, they just want to see what it's like, or to be honest, they might just do it because they feel they have to. And certainly with the curriculum changes, that maybe is going to be something that people will now feel more, because I do believe it's a part of the curriculum, certainly for senior trainees, that research or some involvement or engagement with research activity is required. And so hopefully this talk will be of use if you're thinking about research, and how you could engage with it. And to help you figure out what you want to do, you need to know sort of, I think, why you want to do it. So for myself, when I look back at why I did a PhD, and I have to say, over the 6 years that I spent doing my PhD, I did often think, why? But for me, it was because I had a really strong interest in perioperative care of the older patient. I'd been a member of the Age Anaesthesia Association. I'd been their trainee representative for a while. I was really intrigued to know about how frailty affected perioperative care and what we could do as perioperative physicians to manage that if possible. And it wasn't just that I wanted to do a project to see what I could do to help. I wanted to really understand it. I wanted to really have a good grasp of what frailty was, its impact on the patient, its impact on surgery, in fact, the impact of surgery on the older frail patient. I wanted to have a really good understanding, and I felt I needed time. And it wasn't time I was going to get alongside my training. It was time that I needed on its own, just to spend some time and focus on it, and to do a project, hopefully, or maybe more than one project. And so for me, a PhD seemed the obvious answer. And I also knew it would help me in other ways. It would help me with my writing. It would help me with my critical thinking. It would help me with my teaching. So I thought it could offer quite a lot. And it was something that I just realised it was something I wanted to do. And I'll go on to explain a bit more about the benefits it offers later on. And so a PhD seemed obvious to me. However, I can completely understand that actually you could just think, I want to gain some skills, or I want to, I spend a lot of time doing audit or quality improvement because I have to, but I want it to be more worthwhile. I want it to actually produce something and be of use. And that's also why I went on to develop MERCAT, and I'll explain that towards the end of the talk. And I think that actually can fulfill a lot of things people want to achieve with research. Obviously, depending on when you're thinking about the why, what kind of research is there? For me, my research was very patient focused. It involved actually projects in using patients, looking at their recovery following surgery. But some people did bench work, and some people may want to do a mix of bench work and patient focused work. Certainly, if you're looking at bench work, that's kind of pushing you more towards the formal route or having an affiliation to university to some degree, either through a master's or a PhD. So there are a number of options. So research fellowship, I think Nottingham do have them, they are out there. And research fellowships typically are for 1 year, and they can offer you an experience to develop your research skills, normally on a project that's already up and running. and they may be affiliated with a master's or they may not. The degrees are master's or a PhD. So often a master's is, again, typically just 1 year. And that's why, hopefully if you did a research fellowship, you could maybe get a master's out of it as well. PhD, so they're 3 years, but I'll be honest, mine took years. So years, and I mean 6 years. So 3 years was spent actually collecting the data, doing the legwork, so to speak. And the other 3 years was writing up. Now that was a bit extended because of COVID. But a PhD does take a significantly greater length of time. And also the difference with a PhD is that it has to be novel and it has to be your work. So whereas a master's or a research fellowship, you could maybe essentially jump onto a project that's already up and running, or someone might have got things established and you're adding to it, or doing a component that's complementary to it. There'll be an element of that which isn't your work, whereas a PhD must be all your own work. And that's absolutely essential for you to be able to be awarded your PhD. You must prove it with all your own initiative, work and effort. And then you've got research that you could do as part of your current practice, so alongside training, and that would be, for example, associate PI schemes, and I think you've had a talk on that as well, and the trainee research network engagement. So that is all stuff that can be done alongside and part of your current training. So they're the main options that are open to you. And unfortunately, with everything, money also comes into the picture. So a research fellowship, and you're doing a project that will probably already be up and running, will probably already have funding arranged. But funding you can either get from the NIHR or the NIAA. You can get grants and awards from the AAGBI or the Royal College of Anaesthetists. There are specialty grants. So I think, for example, the OBS Association, they will do grants or awards as well. Or you could look outside of the anaesthetic field. For example, I could have gone to the British Geriatric Society. Your supervisor might actually already have the funding in place. You're doing work towards a bigger project they may already have funding for, or you could self-fund it. Now, I actually self-funded. My PhD was a project that I set up from scratch. There wasn't anything already running. I devised it completely, and consequently, I then had to find the funding. So I actually self-funded, and then once I got things up and running and knew what I was doing and pulled the projects together, I then applied for funds and applied for grants and awards. So you can start off with self-funding and apply, but you have to be prepared to self-fund throughout, because there's no guarantee you're going to get a grant or an award. Once you start this, you're committed to financially supporting it throughout. Now, I've already mentioned one of the reasons that I wanted to do a PhD was because I wanted to develop my critical and analytical thinking. And whether this slide sort of shows that clearly or not, it's hard to say. I found it very hard to describe it, which might also seem a bit weird. But I think what a PhD offers you, by the end of it, you realise, you probably don't see it whilst you're doing it, is it really develops your ability to really critically think around an issue or a project or a debate. Because when you do a PhD, like I said, it's your own work, and it really becomes part of you, and you develop it, and it grows, and you defend it, and you're coming at a question that you've put forward, and you're thinking of all the different ways you can come at this question. How can you put it out there, and then how can you answer the question and all the different answers that you could possibly get, and how can you be sure that you've put forward the right question and then you've got the right answer? And then how do you present that? How do you say to someone, this is what I've done, and this is what I thought of, and this was the answer I got? How do you defend it? Because other people might have asked a very similar question and come up with a completely different answer, and that challenges you. And so, you learn to really critically think around your own work, and by extension around the work of others in your field, and you learn to defend it. You have to learn to take criticism. You have to learn to essentially rip your own work apart and then to put it back together and justify it. That's sort of your viva. That's a bit harsh, actually. Maybe that's a bit harsh. But it really makes you think very deeply around projects. It makes you think of different perspectives, different ways of looking at something, and different ways of addressing it and coming up with an ultimate answer or answers if you can't get one single answer. And I think that's something you can't really appreciate till you've maybe done it a bit and you actually come out the other side and you look back and you go, oh, right, okay. Oh, that was, okay, I get that. And the university helps you to learn that. It's something that you learn also through working with colleagues, other PhD students. Your supervisors sort of guide you through it very slowly. It comes not just through the actual work you're doing, the writing of ethical forms, which is questioning you and you're justifying why you're doing it, but also the presentations you give, the writing you do when you put it into paper for publications. It just develops throughout the whole process. And I think that's the biggest thing. And it is really applicable to medicine and your normal sort of otherwise clinical day-to-day, because, especially if you look at COVID, all of the information that's been out there, what do you believe? This just helps you kind of go through that minefield of information and figure out what you're going to follow, what you're going to, pick up on and take forward. So I think it is a very, very useful skill. But in more simplistic terms, you learn to problem solve. So there will be numerous problems in your PhD or even a master's project or really any project. And they only sort of unravel as you get involved. And then it's kind of unraveling it and sorting it out. So you really do develop your problem solving skills. Also stats, everyone hates stats, but actually you don't hate it so much once you've kind of done it with your own work, if that makes some sense. Certainly if you go through a university degree, then they will have statisticians who can help. Presenting, so you'll think, okay, well, we present loads, we have to present loads as a medic anyway. But actually this is different because you're standing up there and you're explaining to an audience why you've chosen to do something, why you've done it in that way, and then defending your answers, defending your conclusions, and you're critically actually discussing yourself at the same time. You're telling what flaws you think are in your own work. So it's very different because you're selling yourself and you're talking about yourself in your own work to people who may agree with it or may challenge you on it. And I think that is a different skill to just giving a talk on a subject or a teaching on, research activity, for example. And again, scientific writing, it's the same as what I've just said in presentations, but actually you're putting it down on paper. And the important thing about scientific writing is you have to be able to evidence everything. You can't just make a statement, it has to be evidenced. You can't just make an inference or a conclusion, you have to explain why and evidence that. And so it really makes you think long and hard about what you write. You can't be flippant, not that I'm saying any of us are, but you pay a lot of attention to every statement that you write. So for example, when I wrote my thesis, I could spend a whole day just writing one paragraph because I'd have to really think about every sentence and was it meaningful? Was it worth writing down? And was it supported? Was my statement supported? Could I verify it and prove it? So these are skills that you certainly... And then there's teaching. And I mentioned that this was one of the reasons why I wanted to do a PhD. Now, the beauty of going back to university is they have excellent teaching to help you develop your own educational skills. And that I found brilliant. And I really took advantage of that. And if you ever get the opportunity to go to the University of Nottingham's educational event on how to do a good poster presentation, it's fascinating, and you will realise that every poster that you've ever seen at any medical conference is utter rubbish. To be honest, it was completely eye-opening. Having said that, I haven't been able to make my posters as good as what they try to convince me to do. But it was really, really good. And there are other teaching. So you learned how to do lecture-based teaching, small group teaching. It, really, really useful. And that is a positive. But also you get new teaching opportunities. So you teach junior doctors who are doing academic F1s, for example, but also undergraduates. And you can supervise undergraduate dissertations, which is really a challenge and rewarding. You're supervising someone through project development, delivery, and then also writing it up in their own dissertation and potentially defending that. So that's a unique and different teaching experience to what you get from your day-to-day as a medical trainee. And so when you start off your PhD, you start off in this picture here. So, I know fine well that I said, right, okay, I've got a plan. I'll do it in 3 years, and then I'll write up when I go back into training. The reality truly was this. There's another brilliant picture that describes a PhD as a snake and ladders board. You go up one ladder, down 5 snakes, up one ladder, down 4 snakes, and it goes round and round. But this reality is what will shape your ability to critically think and analyze. And it's what will enable you to really grow with your writing skills and your presenting skills. So it's harsh, but it's there for a reason. It's what you have to tell yourself anyway. And your to-do list for years on end, and I do mean years, will look very much like this. Work on your thesis is in every to-do list right the way through. But it's really nice when you can look in your diary and go, it's not there anymore. Or at least when you look in your diary and you've got your graduation date. So, a PhD, you're in it for the long haul. You are. And the writing is hard work. So I will advise one thing. I went into the write-up stage and I did it with training as a full-time trainee. And I thought, yeah, that could be all right. But it is very, very difficult. So do be warned. When you go into research, particularly a master's or a PhD, you do have to write a dissertation. My thesis, I think, was 89,000 words. At one point, it was 100,000, and I got it down to 89,000. But at the beginning of it, I never thought I'd get greater than 30,000. That's a lot of words, and it takes a lot of time. And there is a lot of this. There is a lot of Final Doc version 22. There's a tremendous amount of that. And this other one sort of also I felt like there's a lot of times, to be honest, but that's part of the process. I think that's the best way to describe it. But you will get there. You will do your viva. I actually loved my viva. It was one of the best things I've done. I mean, it was better than an interview, and that sounds really sad, I know, but actually it was a really engaging and actually quite entertaining discussion with people on my work who they were genuinely fascinated about what I'd done, and it was genuinely a really nice time actually. I can say that in hindsight. But then after it comes the amendments, or as in this diagram it says corrections, and that's the next hurdle. But you do get there. And it was worth it in the end. Having said all of that, that's a PhD, but you don't have to go down that route. So, Trainee Research Network. So, back in 2015, I went to a GAT conference, and I think it was in Manchester. And in that GAT conference, they had this map, but at that time it didn't have this here. And they were doing a talk, and I think they were talking on IHYPE, which was the then RAFT project on intraoperative hypertension. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. And what I really liked about it was I hated doing audits. I did an audit for a tick box for my ARCP, and it was a complete and utter waste of time every single year. And I'd often thought, if only we could all get together, because I'm sure there's about 5 other people doing exactly the same project as me in a different hospital, but we're all doing it so subtly different, we can't just pool all the data. But we should sort this out. And actually, to me, that's what the Trainee Research Networks were trying to achieve. So in this map, you can see the various different trainee research networks. The big ones, the well-known ones, are Swarm, STAR, Plan in London. I think Swarm has the best logo. They're actually so big that they actually have research fellowships as on offer for trainees as part of the TRN. But then there are other smaller ones, and that's absolutely fine. And here it just shows what they try to do. So they try to facilitate collaborative working. They try to help meet research education needs, hence this talk today. And they link up with NIHL portfolio work. So, for example, you can do SNAP, Floella, and they all come under the umbrella of the Research Audit Federation of Trainees. Now, that was set up in 2013, and it tries to support the trainee networks. It provides a link between the trainee networks and the Royal College and the NIAA and the AAGBI. And it offers national projects, which ideally are NIHR funded. So it offers trainees opportunity to be involved with a big national project. Now, I know that there has been some criticism for RAFT because they've done Dales, which I'll explain a little bit in a moment, and iHype before that. It's taken a long time to see the outcome from that. A lot of work was put in, but it did take a while. Now, the thing to realise is that the trainees on RAFT are all trainees doing training. They're not allocated time to do this. And it became apparent that that was the problem. These projects were generating a lot of data. They were putting a lot of time in to set up and get going, and then they were generating a lot of data. And it was just taking a long time to work through it. So when I was on the RAFT committee, we did a lot of restructuring. And so now you'll have a RAFT project instead of every year. I think it'll be about every 3 years. The committee will essentially run RAFT, help with all of the things that the networks require, education, funding, linking to the Royal College, and then they'll set up a RAFT project. And then when that gets chosen and goes into process for being delivered, that committee will go on and do that, and that will be their role. And they'll help deliver it with a trainee network that put the project forward, and they'll help go through the data and the analysis and pull it together for publication. And whilst they're doing that, another committee will have come in to do the general day-to-day running of RAFT. So hopefully with this restructuring, we will get RAFT projects going through, but with more timely outcomes. So Dales, which was the last one, looked at drug allergy labels in the elective surgical population. And it was, fantastically run, considering this was by trainees doing it in their own time. It used RedCap, which is an online data collection system, so it got rid of paper. So all of the data was input real-time electronically. And the outcome has started to be published. So we've had 2 recent publications. Now you'll notice that it says on behalf of the Research Audit Federation of Trainees, and that's absolutely imperative. So what we try to do is for all of the trainees who contributed significantly to the work of the project get recognised. So all of the names are linked to PubMed. So for example, I could put my name in and it would link to both of these papers. And that's something we are trying very hard to ensure, so that for all the hard work that is put in, people do get some kind of publication, some recognition for it. And certainly within our region, with Dales, we contributed very well. Actually, we were one of the biggest contributors. These are all of the different hospitals. So you had your regional rep, which was myself at that time, and then you had leads in each of the hospitals, and then trainees helping to deliver. Now, when I spoke about PhDs and masters earlier, one of the biggest issues for that work is ethics, particularly PhD. Because it has to be your own work, you have to sort of put in the ethics, you've got to develop it yourself, and that takes an awful lot of time. With masters or research fellowships, if projects are already up and running, that paperwork will be done for you. But actually, having some experience of working with the hospital ethics boards and the research departments is very useful. And certainly for the project leads, although all the paperwork was provided, they still had to liaise with the local ethics boards, with the research departments, in order for the hospitals to agree to take on the projects and support them. And so it did deliver extra research management and leadership experience over and above just a simple audit. And I think a lot of people at the time did find that very, very valuable. And then in addition to these bigger projects, each hospital will be doing its own projects, and some will collaborate. And then within MERCAT itself, it can do its own local stuff, but it can collaborate with others. So, for example, we collaborated in the project Trainee, which was an obstetric-based project that had been set up by the Network Plan, which is London. But not every TRN was involved, just a number of TRNs were involved. So, MERCAT might not just do its own work, which is led by you, the trainee, within MERCAT. It can collaborate with other TRNs locally or a bit further afield, and it can collaborate within national RAFT projects with, hopefully all of the TRNs pulling together. And so hopefully I've kind of provided a bit of a summary. Personally, I think research does help the development of numerous skills. I've alluded to them: communication skills, presenting, writing, your ability to critically analyse and think. And all of these skills are transferable to your medical degree. So even if you just do a master's or a research fellowship and you acquire these skills, they will be useful in your career as you go forward in medicine. And, what you do in research is completely up to you. It depends on what you want to achieve, and only you know that. And people do very well with PhDs, but people also do exceptionally well with work through TRNs and RAFT. There's a lot of scope down either route you go along. And even if you just do a little bit, and it's enough to tick a box for your curriculum requirements, I still think you'll probably find it will hopefully give you something, give you some skill that is useful going forward. So I hope that's been useful. I hope it's been informative. And if there's anything that you would like to ask me, then please do not hesitate to get in touch. My email is at the bottom. And many thanks for listening. Okay, bye-bye.